How well does the cheapest version of Dell's new G5 Special Edition gaming laptop perform in games? I've tested 21 different games at all setting levels and compared it against other laptops to see how it stacks up. And spoiler, the results were very interesting. I've got the more budget-friendly, lowest-spec model here, which currently starts at $880 which means there's a 6-core AMD Ryzen 5 4600H processor, Radeon 5600M graphics, 8GB of memory and dual channel, and a 60Hz 1080p screen. I'll test response time too. You can get a better screen, more battery, or faster CPU when ordering though. You can find prices linked in the description or on the Dell website. The Dell G5 has the G key on the F7. Pressing this enables high performance mode, which boosts performance and fan speed, so I've done all testing with this enabled. As the G5 has an AMD Ryzen processor and Radeon graphics, it's able to use Smart Shift, which cannot be disabled. Basically, this will dynamically shift power around to where it's needed for optimal performance. For instance, in a GPU-heavy load, the GPU will get the bulk of the power. AMD told me that the 5600M will run between 60 and 95 watts in the G5. We'll only be covering gaming performance here. I'll cover thermals in depth in the next video. Let's start out by going through all games at all setting levels, then afterwards we'll see how the AMD Dell G5 gaming laptop compares with some other laptops. Red Dead Redemption 2 was tested using the game's built-in benchmark tool, and this test is tough on pretty much any laptop regardless of specs at max settings. That said though, the performance is more than 10 FPS ahead of the more expensive G5 with 4800H. I'll explain this later. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode, and it was playing okay in terms of average FPS, however the 1% lows were on the lower side, perhaps due to the 8GB of memory. Let me know if you want me to retest it with 16GB to see the difference. Control was playing okay at high settings, though medium felt a bit better if you actually get into a fight. In my test, it was able to get us above 60 FPS, while low could hit 100 FPS. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and like Red Dead Redemption 2, it was actually performing slightly ahead of the 4800H G5, but again, more on that shortly. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. It was playing well even maxed out, which was still reaching above 100 FPS. However, there were some pretty big gains to be had at minimum, which may help reduce input lag with the 60Hz panel. Call of Duty Modern Warfare was tested in campaign mode, and I've also tested it with the settings either maxed out or at minimum, though there wasn't as big of a difference between them this time compared to Apex, still playable at max though. Borderlands 3 was tested using the game's built-in benchmark, and high settings was just under 60 FPS in this one. Then it drops lower a fair bit at higher levels. Doom Eternal wasn't able to run at Nightmare or Ultra Nightmare settings as you need more than 6GB of VRAM. However, I don't think it really looks all that much better at higher settings anyway, and Ultra settings was still plenty for the 60Hz panel. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was tested with the built-in benchmark tool, and although this is a resource-heavy game, we're still able to reach above 60 FPS at very high settings. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and as a less demanding title, it was still running very well with over 100 FPS at the highest epic setting preset. Even the 1% low was above the screen's refresh rate. Overwatch is another less demanding game and was tested in the practice range. Once more, no issues at all with the highest epic setting preset, and the 1% low was again well above the screen's refresh rate. CSGO was tested using the Euletical FPS benchmark, and there were only extremely minor differences between the 3 setting levels that I've tested with, so might as well just use maximum I guess. Dota 2 was tested playing in the middle lane, and the results are down a bit compared to say an Intel-based laptop, but honestly still pretty decent, and you'll be able to play it at maximum no problem at all. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark using Vulkan. Ultra settings was doing well with 120 FPS, and like many others, the 1% low is easily surpassing the screen's refresh rate. Metro Exodus was tested using the built-in benchmark. Most parts of the game perform a fair bit better than this, so don't take these results as a good indication of what to expect throughout the entire game. It's more of a worst case. The Division 2 was also tested with the built-in benchmark. The highest Ultra setting preset was able to hit 60 FPS, though we could almost double this frame rate by stepping down to low. Monster Hunter World was also around the 60 FPS mark with the highest setting preset in use, though this was just running through the main town, but higher is possible at low. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and despite not being able to hit 60 FPS at low settings in this test, it's still usable as it doesn't need a high frame rate to play in my opinion. Far Cry New Dawn was also tested with the game's benchmark, and Ultra settings was still just able to get to 60 FPS in this one. The Witcher 3 was playable with the Ultra setting preset, which was still above 60 FPS, though we could boost performance a fair bit with high settings, where even the 1% low was now above the average FPS at Ultra. F1 2019 was tested using the game's benchmark tool, and yeah, plenty of frames for our 60Hz panel even at the highest setting preset. Let's also take a look at how this lower tier configuration of the Dell G5 Special Edition gaming laptop compares with other laptops. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different drivers. In Battlefield 5, I've got this G5 highlighted in red. As mentioned earlier, this lower spec G5 was ahead of the higher spec version in some games, and this was one of them. Well, at least in terms of average FPS. Granted, it's just a 1 FPS difference. And to be fair, the 1% low with the Ryzen 5 model was lower, but still an interesting result that seems to indicate the 5600M is doing most of the work here. These are the results from Far Cry 5 with Ultra settings in the built-in benchmark. As a test that typically depends more on the processor, the 4600H G5 was behind the 4800H model this time, but it was only by 4 FPS or so, nothing major and hardly worth a few extra $100. These are the results from Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. This was another where the cheaper G5 had a slight lead. Yeah, it's only one frame, but consider this base model is $880 at the moment, while the higher spec one is $1,200. These results are very interesting. In more cases than not, the lower spec and cheaper configuration of the G5 with lower tier CPU and half the memory is beating the more expensive version at higher setting levels. I suspect that this is a result of smart shift. In theory, the Ryzen 5 can use its power over fewer cores for higher clock speeds, and I doubt most games will see much improvement going from 6 to 8 cores. So with more power dedicated towards the 5600M, this could explain why the cheaper G5 is performing better. I'm going to investigate this further and I'll report the findings in a future comparison video between the cheaper and more expensive G5, so stay tuned. At the moment, this G5 is available with two different screen options. We looked at the 144Hz panel in my previous video, which had a 9.3 millisecond average gray-to-gray response time. But this cheaper model has the 60Hz panel, and these are its results. You can find a link in the description outlining what all these numbers mean. But basically, the 60Hz panel has a 22.5 millisecond response time, so it's much slower comparatively. As I'm not personally that sensitive to this, I can't say I had any issues while gaming. Well, as long as FreeSync was enabled. The tearing is pretty bad with it off. In my last G5 video, I mentioned FreeSync wasn't working. However, AMD have fixed this bug in a driver update. In terms of driver stability, I haven't had any games crash so far. However, as is the case with pretty much all Radeon-based gaming laptops I've tested, running many games with Vulkan in particular would open on the Vega graphics instead. This is easy to fix by setting the game to high performance mode to ensure it opens up automatically using the 5600M. However, ideally this would be fixed to just work out of the box. Let me know what you thought of the gaming performance from this Ryzen 5 4600H and Radeon 5600M gaming laptop down in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, then get subscribed for the full review to see everything this G5 has to offer.